Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and today I want to talk about a few books that I have read recently that I have enjoyed. So welcome in. I am so happy to have you here with me today. I know this content is a little bit different from my typical writing type material, but I wanted to talk about some of my favorite books with you guys. Here with me today, I've got my top 6 books that I have read recently. Now recently means to me within the last 3 or 4 months. So some of the books that I'm going to be talking about, I did read at the end of last year, but it's a recent read. I think so far this year I've read 6 books, and it's not these 6 books. I would say probably within the last 10 to 12 books, this is about half of those books. There's no particular order of the books that I'm going to be talking about other than the last book. I'm going to save the last one as my top favorite book right now. So let's go ahead and dive in, grab your favorite beverage, and let's get on into it. If I'm in a different spot, it's because I had to chase my cat away because he was playing with a plastic bag and he wouldn't stop. Anyways, so the first book on this list that I want to talk about today is The Maid by Nita Prose. So this book follows our main character. Her name is Molly the Maid. She is the maid of this really top 5-star hotel. She goes around and she's the maid, right? Like she's the housekeeper. She cleans all of the rooms before customers come in, while customers are there, and then after they leave. And Molly the Maid takes her job quite seriously. She is very pristine, she's very particular, she is a very neat freak type of person, and as a neat freak myself, I can appreciate that about Molly the Maid. However, under Molly's watch, somebody is murdered in this hotel, and a lot of the signs are starting to point to Molly the Maid, and she does not do herself any favors. In fact, she gets herself deeper and deeper into this murder case, and she is like the only suspect of this murder for the majority of this book. This book is a 4.5 to a 5-star read for me. It is so fun. It had me laughing, and I really enjoyed this book. When I originally went into this book, I had different expectations. I thought this book was going to be a lot darker, more sinister. I was completely wrong. This book is a lot like Clue. It's very lighthearted. It's a really fun mystery. I'll be also totally honest. I feel like it's a little predictable with the whodunit type situation. Molly is a really fun character to follow. I feel like she's a very relatable character, and I really enjoyed the whole ride that we went through. But I absolutely loved this book. There are high stakes, but to me, I would say it's a pretty low stakes book. It's pretty short too. My mom actually read this at my recommendation and she loved it too. Book 2 just came out. It's called The Mystery Guest. I do have plans on reading that later this year. The next book I want to talk about is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I'm going to quickly read the synopsis because I feel like the synopsis is a much better synopsis than I would be able to give you guys. All sorcerers are evil. Elizabeth has known that for as long as she has known anything. Raised as a foundling in one of Astermere's great libraries, Elizabeth has grown up along magical grimoires that rattle beneath iron chains, capable of transforming into grotesque monsters. When an act of sabotage releases the library's most dangerous grimoire, Elizabeth is accused of treason, with no one to turn to but her sworn enemy, a sorcerer Nathaniel Thorne, and his mysterious servant. She finds herself entangled in a centuries-old conspiracy. Not only could the great libraries go up in flames, but the world along with them. I can't believe it took me so long to read this book. So this was another 4.5 to a 5-star read for me. I had a few little issues that I'll talk about, but this book I absolutely loved our main character. I feel like it was really easy to get inside of her head and to understand where she came from. I feel like this author did an absolutely phenomenal job outlining this story and having twists and turns at the correct times and really solid pacing. I was never bored reading this story. I remember thinking about 20% into this book that there was a lot that was going on. You have grimoires, you have an orphan, which is our main character, you also have sorcerers and all of these great libraries, and then this huge catastrophe happens, and within the first 20% with all of this stuff happening, I was very curious as to where it would all lead. Like, how is all of this going to tie together? Because I feel like there's a lot going on in this book, and the author I feel like did an amazing job tying in all of those points. I feel like it took the author a while to come up with this story, but then also to connect all the dots, like to connect all the pieces, and honestly I thought it was a hoot. I thought that this was beautifully done. I thought it was very well paced. I did enjoy the romance portion of this story. I appreciated the banter between the two characters, and I thought that the characters had great communication with each other. The one thing towards the end of the book that I got a little tired of was the banter, but I think that's just a personal preference for me. The reason I'm also kind of beating myself up about taking so long with reading this book is because at the beginning of last year, I had actually sat down to start reading this book, and for whatever reason, I just couldn't get into it. I wasn't in a good place to read this book. I had actually soft DNF'd it at the beginning of 2023, and then I came back to it at the beginning of 2024, and I'm so glad I did because it was a great time and a really easy read. The next book I want to talk about, The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Audier, and this book, so good. This was a 4.5 to a 5-star read as well. I'm gonna quickly read the synopsis and then we'll talk about it. Khalid, the 18-year-old Caliph of Khorasan, is a monster. Each night he takes a new wife only to have her killed by sunrise. Shahrazad is the first volunteer to become Khalid's bride. She vows to stop his reign of terror for the friends she lost and for all those who perished before her. Incredibly, Shahrazad manages to survive her first morning and then the next. Night after night, she mesmerizes the Caliph with her storytelling, at once buying time and digging deeper into the elusive Boy King's past. If Khalid is truly the murderous madman everyone says he is, how does Shahrazad find it so easy to fall for him? I absolutely loved this book. I loved our main character, Shahrazad. She also goes by Shazi. I am currently reading book 2. It's just a duology. This is a pretty chunky book, but I won't lie, I flew through this. I read this book in 2 sittings, and I'm a relatively slow reader. I also had the audiobook, so take that into account, and I thought the audiobook was fantastic as I read along with the actual paperback. This book, you do have a little bit of a love triangle in there. It's not the forefront, although I will say that the romance between Shahrazad and Khalid is at the forefront of the story. I loved it. This was one of my favorite romances that I've ever read. You really learn more about these two characters as individuals and the reasons why certain things have happened, and then you grow to love their romance together and you like seeing them together. I loved seeing Shahrazad test him and push him to these limits. She is a very feisty character and I absolutely loved that. I think that the writing in this book is also just phenomenal. Like I said, I read this in like 2 sittings and I think it's over 500 pages or close to it. Oh no, it's a little over 400 pages. I feel like it was pitched to me, or I saw this somewhere as 1001 Nights, kind of a very similar vibe to that. While I haven't read that, it also gave me Aladdin vibes. The author did a phenomenal job of making me interested in the politics of this world, and while that wasn't the forefront of the story, you get a lot of those answers in book 2, and I think she set up this duology extremely well. I haven't finished book 2, so who knows? Maybe it's not set up very well. But so far, this duology is a very solid duology. I very much loved this first book, and I think the pacing is very well done. It's not insta-lovey. It's a very much, at least for what I like and my taste in books, it felt very enemies to lovers in a very beautifully paced way, if that makes any sense. And I loved the romance scenes. It got a little spicy, but I wouldn't say it was like super spicy. Overall, I thought this was a fantastic story. I would definitely recommend this one, for sure. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to add about this book. It gave me very similar vibes to The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. However, I feel like this did it like way better. I feel like the stakes were a little bit higher in this, and a lot of the things that our main character did, she had a lot more motive and why things were motivating her and why she was doing certain actions to move the story across. So it does give me similar vibes to Trisha Levenseller's story. However, I do think this was way more fleshed out and way more revenge driven. The next one I want to talk about is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. This book, you guys, oh my god, I sobbed. So let me quickly read the synopsis and then we can get into it. Faye Adekola wants to learn how to be alive again. It's been 5 years since the accident that killed the love of her life, and she's almost a new person now. An artist with her own studio, sharing a brownstone apartment with her best friend Joy, who insists it is time for Faye to ease back into the dating scene. Faye isn't ready for anything serious, but a steamy encounter at a rooftop party cascades into a whirlwind summer summer she could never have imagined. A luxury trip to a tropical island, dessicant meals in the glamorous home of a celebrity chef, and a major curator who wants to launch her art career. She's even started dating the perfect guy before it has a chance, by the dangerous thrill Faye feels every time she locks eyes with the one person in the house who is most definitely off limits: his father. How is Faye willing to go for a second chance at love? Akwaeke Emezi's vivid and passionate writing takes us deep into a world of possibility and healing, and a constant bravery of choosing love against all odds. I sobbed. Hopefully I won't sob talking about it, so let's just detach for a second. So this book, I feel like, captured grief and going through the stages of grief extremely well. Understanding that grief is different for everybody. Everybody grieves differently. Everybody goes through those stages of grief at different times, at different speeds, and sometimes they never get out of certain stages of grief. And that's just how life is, and that's just how grief is. Personally, I think if you have ever lost somebody very immediate to you and you go through those stages of grief, I think this story you will resonate with very, very well. I lost one of my best friends at a very young age. Reading this story reminded me of going through those stages of grief. We don't really have to get into all of that, but my point being is this book is something that changes you. And I personally think that this is a book that everybody should read. Now, I absolutely love our couple in this. I think this story was absolutely beautifully done. I think these characters were just very relatable, very real, and very fleshed out. Akwaeke Emezi has an extremely impressive and amazing way to capture grief, and I think Akwaeke Emezi does a phenomenal job with developing all of their characters, having them all be different. You knew exactly who these characters were. You understood what their motives were. At least I did. I understood what their motives were and their emotions that they were feeling. I bought it. I thought all of these characters were very, very well done. I also love that it was set in a nice tropical island. That was fun when it was 33 degrees outside. But I thought this book was beautifully written. Oh, and this book was a 4.5 to a 5-star read for me. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning. The one thing that kind of threw me off with this story that I wasn't expecting was the language, like the cursing language. I wasn't prepared for that. Maybe that's typical for Akwaeke Emezi's stories. This was my first book of theirs, so I was not aware. So it did kind of throw me off a little bit. I don't mind cussing in stories. I cuss on my channel all the time. That was something I think was a little shocking to me. And that would be something that I would just caution somebody if they don't like a lot of swearing to, I don't want to say to steer them away from it, because I think that they would still be able to enjoy the story, but that is just something to note. Again, I don't mind cussing. However, it was pretty frequent and it got a little tiresome after a while. I mean, 3 times on one page with your character saying fuck, not my style, but I would say it didn't take away from my reading experience. I would highly recommend for somebody to read, and I absolutely love the cover of this book. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and it just reminds me of sunshine and a tropical beach. All right, the next book up is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Dower. Or Doer. This book was a 4.5 to a 5-star read. Marie-Laure Leblanc lives with her father in Paris near the Museum of Natural History, where he works. When she is 12, the Nazis occupy Paris and the father and daughter flee to the walled citadel of Saint-Malo. In the audiobook, they do a lot better with pronouncing it, just bear with me. Where Marie-Laure's reclusive great uncle lives in a tall house by the sea. With them, they carry what might be the museum's most valuable and dangerous jewel. In a mining town in Germany, Warner, an orphan, grows up with his younger sister, enchanted by the crude radio they find that brings them news and stories from places they have never seen or imagined. Warner becomes an expert at building and fixing these crucial new instruments and is enlisted to use his talent to track down the resistance. Marie-Laure and Warner, from warring countries, both have lost many people that they have loved. Coming together in Saint-Malo, as Dower illustrates the ways against all odds people try to be good to one another. And apparently this book took him 10 years to write. This book was a 4.5 to a 5-star read, and I sobbed. This story was beautifully written. Beautifully written. I feel like the pacing, from what I remember, kind of lulled in a few places. I think I read this at the end of November. It was just heartbreaking. Your heart literally gets ripped out of your chest reading this book. So I also listened to the audiobook while I followed along in the paperback. First of all, it's not a love story. I was originally under the impression that it was going to be a love story, but it's not. It's not a love story in like the traditional sense. That's all I'll say about that. But I absolutely loved this story. Our two main characters are two very relatable people. I find it very interesting that they both do want to do good. In a current state of the world that is at war, they are just trying to understand themselves, but also trying to understand the world that they live in and survive. The story does open up when our two main characters are younger, so you do get to watch them grow up a little bit, so you do get that soft spot in your heart by watching them as children and then grow up to be teenagers, and that I absolutely loved. I do love when time passes in stories and you see characters grow and change. So that is also an aspect of this story. And I thought it was absolutely beautifully written. I think Anthony Dower crafts words just absolutely beautifully in the saddest way possible. I think Anthony Dower, kind of like Akwaeke Emezi, does an outstanding job with crafting characters that feel like real people. I really feel like you could put yourself into any of the characters' situations and understand why they would do certain things and understand their struggles and understand them as people. And I just think it was all absolutely beautifully done. And like I said, there were many parts in this book where I sobbed, hacking, sobbing, and I had to stop reading for a moment because I was just crying so much. But I absolutely loved this. I didn't know that at the time when I was reading this that it was being adapted into a Netflix film or a Netflix series. And I think that came out at the end of last year while I was reading this. I have full plans to watch the TV show. I've heard really great things about the adaptation, so I'm pretty excited about it. This book has kind of started me down my historical fiction / World War II book era, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying some of the books that I'm reading right now that are in the same time frame. As much as you can enjoy it, you know, it's war. The last book I want to talk about that I don't have here with me because I loaned it to a friend. Oh my gosh. So this is the book that if someone told me that they were in a reading slump and they just haven't been enjoying anything, it would be this book. It would be this book. I really want to reread it once my friend gives this book back to me. But the name of this book is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. And this book is a 5-star read. I had a blast with this book. I'll talk about it a little bit. And I don't need a synopsis because I know this story. So this book is a dual timeline where you follow a character in 1982 and she is an aspiring actress and she is making the trek to New York City to try and start her career. But she breaks down in a small town in upstate New York. She has run out of money trying to get to New York City. So she's decided to just stay in this small town, but she needs to make some money. She gets a job working night shift at the Sundown Motel. She soon realizes why that shift has not been able to keep somebody on it. Weird, creepy things start happening at this motel. She shows up one day to work and by 3 a.m. she has vanished without a trace. Now you flash forward to the second timeline, which is 2017. You follow our main character. Her name is Carly. She is the other character's niece and she wants to crack her aunt's cold case. She goes to the small town in upstate New York where her aunt vanished in 1982, and she is going to start putting all of the pieces together to figure out what exactly happened to her aunt the night that she disappeared at 3 a.m. She ends up staying in the same apartment her aunt stayed in, and she takes a job at the Sundown Motel, and the same weird things start happening to her. This book, you guys, is phenomenal, and I don't even want to say a whole lot more about it because I don't want to spoil it for you, but I had so much fun reading this book. Each of the characters have their own narrator. You flip back and forth from going from 1982 leading up to what actually happened that night, and then you also go back to, or you flash forward to 2017. We're following our character as she's trying to figure out, put those pieces together as we're learning both timelines, and it is so good. It is just phenomenal. This book, I would absolutely recommend it to anybody. It is so good. It's so creepy and eerie. I was also reading this book for a nice little aesthetic at 3 o'clock in the morning a few times. There were some times when I was reading this that I was looking over my shoulder because I felt like somebody looking, like staring at me through the window. So good. In fact, as I was reading this book at 3 o'clock in the morning, I forgot that our ice maker was on and it dropped ice. I thought it was over. I thought someone had come to get me. I absolutely loved this book. I would definitely say out of the 6 books I mentioned today, I mean, I would recommend all of them. Why not? Read them all. I think they're all great. But I would definitely say The Sundown Motel. That is my all-time favorite. And I'll also let you guys know what my friend says once she gives me the book back. But she's a slow reader, so I'll probably get it back at the end of the year. So those were the 6 books that I have read recently that I've absolutely enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about these books. If you have experiences with these books, I would love to hear about them. I think it would be great for us to talk about these books, or if these are new books that are on your radar now, I would also love to hear about that. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it to the end and you don't know what to say, leave the little book stack emoji, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.